Hi, is this Cindy?
This is she.
All right, well, let me do the official introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very excited to welcome our featured guest for this evening. You know her as someone you grew up watching on television, Shirley Feeney from Laverne Shirley, and she's joining us to talk about her new book, Shirley, I Jest, A Storied Life. We're very excited to welcome Cindy Williams to the show. You're on the air.
Well, thank you, Tiffany and Terry, and that would be Shirley Wilhelmina Feeney.
Oh.
Yes.
It's so cool to have you on the show. I don't know if you remember, because you certainly met so many people in your life. We were at the taping of the Laverne and Shirley reunion show, and you actually met us later, and this may cause you to remember it. I had my ex with me. Remember you dropped a marker on her?
I dropped a marker or a margarita?
No, a marker. It would have probably been funnier if it was a margarita.
No, you were nice.
A marker pen. I hope I didn't soil her outfit.
It's okay. We're divorced.
Oh, that's cruel.
Yeah, but you were so nice to the fans. I mean, it's got to be great being you, because I only liken you to certain people. Great names in the industry that they can know you by just basically one or two names. How is it that, how do you feel about the fact that you probably can't even go to the grocery store?
Oh, you know, I do go to the grocery store. It's one of my greatest pleasures in life these days, and people recognize me every now and then, but it's such a blessing and a pleasure when they do, because, you know, I always say this. It's not like Penny and I played Freddy Krueger and Hannibal Lecter.
Right.
So people come toward us with all their mirth and fun and happiness and great vibrations. So it's always like the most pleasurable thing when and it's such a compliment, you know, when fans, when they spot you in the market.
Absolutely. Well, I want to start out by talking about the book. And asking you, because we've talked to a lot of actors and musicians who have decided to sit down and write a memoir. And why did you decide to sit down and write a book? And the other question to follow that is, you know, I've read a lot of reviews of people online that have received the book, and a lot of people absolutely love it, and then a lot of people are saying, oh, well, it wasn't really an expose. But what the book is exactly what you would expect from someone like you that comes off so professional and so sweet all the time. So what's your response to people that were kind of looking for dirt, and why did you decide to sit down and write the book?
Well, thank you for that. I did not want to write an expose. I wanted to write the exact opposite of that. What good is it? Let's say this. Let's say I sat down and wrote just a tawdry book about all the stuff that was going on at Laverne and Shirley that were rumors and people heard about, all the fighting and this and that, and how the show ended, and just did that. Would that make people happy? You know, is that what people really want, to be fed that cynicism? And, you know, that is exactly what I didn't want to do. I almost titled the book, If You Can't Say Something Nice About someone, don't say anything at all. And I did exactly what I set out to do, which was to write a mirthful, happy, fun book so that when the reader put it down, they had a smile on their face.
You know, I don't think people really understand what it is to be an actor. Doing what we do and interviewing a lot of them, you certainly get to understand it. People think that you guys know each other to the point that you live together, and you guys are together all the time. You guys each have your own lives. But, you know, as far as it goes, as far as you and Penny, you guys talk to each other more than 99% of the actors I know that used to be in shows together.
Right. Well, I just saw Penny 2 weeks ago. I had to go up to, I live in Southern California, way south, toward Palm Springs, and she lives up in L.A., and I had to be in L.A. to do some shows, so I just called and said, I'm staying in the guest room. And she said, which one? The one next to me? I said, absolutely not. You keep that TV on loud all night. I'm staying downstairs. So I came in, and we're just like people would expect, and it would make people feel good. And that's how I wanted the book to be, was that it is an intimate, fun relationship that we have. We're friends. We're like best friends on many, many levels. There's nobody in the world who knows me better than Penny on many levels, and there's nobody in the world who knows her better on many levels than me. So that's exactly what the show was about. That's exactly how we are today, and anything in between that has, occurred between us. And there, we had some tough times together because we're very much alike and very, very different in how we approach certain things, life included. But the end result is we're always on the same page at the same time.
Right.
And we were with the show, and we are right now. I mean, I can say things to her that, I can yell at her about certain things, and she can yell at me about certain things.
Well,
and I can tell, so that's our relationship, and that's, and I only wanted to relate the fun stuff in the book, and I think I did.
Good for you.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think all that stuff's necessary. It shows what kind of a person you are and how courageous you are, and I'm so glad it turned out to know that you guys still talk and everything now, because if I would have been you, I think I would have been a little afraid to be the other half of a show, knowing that other half's brother runs the show. Did you have any apprehensions about that?
No, because I love Gary, and Gary started me out in show business. I mean, Gary Marshall and Fred Roos, I write about it in the book. They were the first two people in show business I ever met. And they took me on in their management company. This is way before Happy Days, even before way before American Graffiti, way before anything I'd ever done. I hadn't done anything. I just drove from my parents' home to meet them. And I write about that in the book, and it was Gary Marshall. And whatever else happened, it was all, it was just all artistic craziness when we'd have problems, but the problems were all sorted out, never brought to the set or the show, and it was just, like I said, artistic differences. Let me say this. Penny would get a script, and she'd have it memorized the second day. I am dyslexic, and, I have a little bit of ADD, and it would take me until we did the dress rehearsal to actually be there. And she would get impatient with that, and I would be PO'd at her for being impatient with me. So that's kind of a disgruntlement. But at the end, when we hit that stage, we were always in rhythm with each other. Otherwise, and in total sync, mind, body, and soul. Otherwise, the show wouldn't have been successful.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I wanted to ask you, and you talk about this in the book, and maybe you can give the listeners a little bit of a taste of some of the stories that they'll read in the book. It was kind of serendipitous, almost, as far as the fact that Ruse and Marshall were kind of managing you, and it was Ruse that had gotten you to go and audition for American Graffiti, which of course we then know we had the pairing of you with Ron Howard, which then spilled over into Happy Days. So can you tell the audience a little bit about auditioning for American Graffiti, and if you were up for it or if you didn't want to do it, and how that whole kind of thing went?
Well, like you said, Tiffany, I do write about that in the book, and I had just come from doing a movie, Travels with My Aunt, in Spain, and I literally got home and got a phone call. I was jet lagging so bad, and I don't do well, especially coming from Spain, to LA. I was terribly just almost ill from jet lagging, and I didn't get in the door when Fred Roos called me and said, I need you to come over here. I can't cast this part. I can't find anybody to play this part in this little movie. I'm going to send you the script over, and I need you to read it and then be here tomorrow to meet with the director. And I said, I can't do that. I'm just out of my mind, exhausted. I'm spent. And he said, you have to do it for me. Now, Fred Roos, and I explained this in the book, Fred Roos and Gary Marshall had this management company, and they were the first two people I ever met in show business. Mm-hmm. And Fred Roos was this brilliant casting director in the day, and he cast Mayberry RFD, so he knew Ron. I mean, it's this whole, what are there, 3 people in this town? It's like, what is it, Kevin Bacon, 6 Degrees of Separation, or whatever that is. It's exactly that. Anyway, so Fred, Fred Roos also went on to produce the Godfather movies and cast those, and he's just brilliant. Anyway, so Fred said, you have to do this as a friend. I can't find this, I can't cast this. I can't find anyone for this part. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, I did. I went over, I met with this kid director, as he said, this kid director who's brilliant, who just came out of USC, and he did this other, movie, THX 1138, and, I said, okay, and I went, I met with George. I don't think we said 15 words to each other the whole time, and at the end he said, terrific, and I left, and then, they called and said he wants to screen test you tomorrow, and I said, I'm tired, but I did. I went over and I screen tested, and they said, you're screen testing with Ronnie Howard, and I said, Ronnie Howard, Opie, and that's all I could think was Opie, and I said, well, all right, but I don't have time to memorize these lines. I'm going to have to hold the script. So I did, and I told Ron, I said, I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to hold the script. And he said, that's fine with me. He was like this. He was 17 years old, about to turn 18, and he was this die-in-the-wool professional.
Right.
And the nicest guy you ever want to meet. And I was enamored with him because he was Opie, and I love Mayberry RFD, and and so we did the screen test, and then they offered me the part, and I was still jet-lagging and reluctant to take it, but in the end, I took it, and the rest is show business history.
Well, I believe in showbiz history. I also believe in fate. And if you think about how this kind of like triangle that involved you in your life, to where Gary worked for the casting agency and casted for American Graffiti, and this and that, and then you wound up working with Ron Howard in Happy Days, also in American Graffiti. There was one other part of this triangle that included George Lucas that could have happened, and that is you auditioned for Princess Leia.
I screen tested, yes. But you know what I failed to put in the book? And I should have researched it, and I'm so sorry I didn't now. There were other actresses that screen tested for Princess Leia. But I know that, I knew that Carrie had screen tested, and I was waiting to hear. And then I had this dream, and I write about that in the book, that George was looking at this girl, and she was playing with dolls, these beautiful, like, American girl dolls, whatever they're called. What are those called, Tiffany?
I think they're the American Girl dolls.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, whatever. And I, and in the dream, I realized George is going to cast a younger actress for this role. And sure enough, like the next day or 2 days later, I got the call, he's gone with Carrie Fisher, which was fine with me. It really was, because in the end, can any of us see anyone playing that part but Carrie? The other thing, though, which was interesting, was when we were doing American Graffiti, he talked with Ron and me about this movie he had, he had written, called Star Wars, and he wanted the characters to all be like young teenagers, like 14, 15. Mm-hmm. That's how he thought of those characters in the beginning, that they were these 14, 15, 16-year-old heroes. you know, and isn't that marvelous?
Yeah.
To know, I mean, just marvelous. I mean, that's a genius of George Lucas.
Well,
And
I'd say
also, I'm sorry. Go on.
I'm just going to say that I felt it turned out well, but one thing that may be impossible for you to even answer, I don't know. If I was in your position, I don't think I can answer this question. Okay, I would say that Laverne Shirley was probably as big for television as Star Wars was for film. Are you happy that it turned out the way it did, or would you rather have gotten to Princess Leia, which undoubtedly you probably wouldn't have got Laverne Shirley after that?
Listen, Terry, I would have liked them both. Let's not kid ourselves.
Good for you.
But no, because I had, up till that point, I'd always played the ingenue, the weeping girl, the lead's best friend who was helping her through some breakup with a boy. That was always, I'd never gotten to do comedy. And I wanted to do comedy so bad because it was in my, I knew I could do it like a gymnast knows they could do a triple Lutz or whatever they're called. And I knew I could do comedy, and I could do physical comedy. And so I wouldn't trade it for the world. Nope, wouldn't trade it for the world.
There you go. Don't have any regrets because you've had a charmed life too, and to have anybody have, yes, you have.
Well, I wanted to mention another thing that you talk about in the book, and knowing and talking about how you were a fan of comedy and you knew you could do it. You certainly ran in the right circles because you talk a little bit about your relationship with Andy Kaufman. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about how you first met him and what your guys' relationship was like?
Well, yes, and I do have a whole chapter dedicated to that. It's called The Mirthful Mouse because, you know, in the beginning he would sing the Mighty Mouse theme song,
yes,
which I was a total fan of Mighty Mouse, but my sister Carol was even more of a fan, and she, when we were little girls, and she wanted to marry Mighty Mouse. And I was going to be her bridesmaid. I write about that in the book. Anyway, so when he sang that theme song, and I saw him on Saturday Night Live, the first time he was ever on, I said, I want to meet this guy. This guy is a genius. He made me laugh out loud, and he got it. He got like a texture of comedy that, you know, was camp. It was like you perform in front of your relatives in the living room at Thanksgiving. You know, you put on a little show when you're a kid. Mm-hmm. He got that mirthful merriness. Anyway, I did meet him one night at the Improv in Los Angeles, and he needed a ride home because he didn't drive. So I gave him a ride home, and then we became great friends, and we dated for a while, and I used to take him to he was a vegetarian, and he would meditate, and when I would drive him to my mother's house, because my mother was this, you know, she loved to prepare Andy vegetarian meals, and so when I would drive him to my mother's house out in the valley from L.A., it was about at that time, a 25-minute ride, he would say, I'm going to meditate now, and just let me, you know, you can just pull up and leave me in the car if I'm not finished, and I'll, you know, come in when I'm finished. Well, that was it every time, and there was this light we had in the driveway, you know, my mother's house in the front yard, and so we'd look out the front window and see Andy sitting there meditating, you know, and it was just otherworldly. That's the only way I can describe it. And then my sister reminded me that he made us play these parlor games. You know, my mother and my sister and me, these parlor games, and I don't remember what they were, but they were like fun, you know, like singing, you know, Old MacDonald had a farm, like we used to do that. It would be things like that. And I just had the greatest time with him, and we remained friends, you know, until he passed. But you know, when he passed, I was married at the time, and you know, had children, and I remember someone saying, you know, your friend Andy is, you know, it's all over that he has cancer, and he's going to the Philippines to have this, you know, psychic healer, you know, surgeon, you know, pull all the bad stuff out of him. And I said, oh, Andy. I mean, I thought he was just, you know, it was another one of his things that he was going to do. anyway, I had the pleasure of performing with him in New York at a comedy club in New York and the Improv out here, and doing his special. I just had the best. He's just the best. I mean, he was just wonderful. And
well,
just a wonderful.
I'm not
person.
meaning to be disrespectful of any way of any type, but you admitted yourself when you first heard about how he was going to get healed, and you thought it was one of his jokes. What do you think today when you hear all this stuff going around that, he faked his death, and there's been things that's popped up here and there? It's kind of like the Elvis thing. Do you think No?
No. Andy's dead.
Yeah.
He'd want me to tell you that. He's gone, and he's up there, and he did not fake his death. Why would he? He didn't. He really had cancer and really was hoping to have a healing. And but I've got to say this, Terry, at the time, when I heard about it, I thought, it's like the wrestling.
Right.
He's going to, say, okay, I'm going to be at the shrine, and they're going to try and heal me, and he's going to have an audience there, and he's going to get mad at the, surgeon or whatever, and have, and make a whole wonderful show out of it. But that wasn't the case. He passed away.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
He had some terrible cancer,
great. Wow.
and he passed away.
I have to say that it's probably no surprise to the probably hundreds of thousands of boys that had a crush on you when they were growing up.
Who's me?
But
only 100,000, Tiffany.
I said
come on,
hundreds of thousands, Cindy.
Hundreds.
Yes.
All right.
No, that would be.
That's so sweet.
But it's no surprise that there was quite a few guys that were smitten with you. And I wanted to mention one of them was Ed Begley Jr., and he writes the foreword to your book, and I have to say, it's got to be one of the sweetest forewords I have ever read to anybody's book ever.
Oh, thank you. Well, he's like my family, and I've just known him since day one. I write about him in the book. But I asked him to write the foreword, and then when I got it, I said, Ed, you can't write about trying to, get in my panties and things like that. And he goes, really? And I go, well, I mean, it's funny. And then everyone who read it around me said, oh, my God, this is so funny.
It is.
And I said, really? Anyway, that's, pardon me, that's just my, cloistered Christian in me, saying, you can't talk about that. But he wrote it so sweetly and so dearly. And it's absolutely the truth. We're the best of friends ever since I met him. The first words out of his mouth when I met him when I was 22 was, he said, will you marry me? And I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, you know what? This guy's more like a brother to me. I mean, it was just like that. Mm-hmm. He's like this great, family member, and that's how he always was to me, and to this day. And he's just my dear, dear, darling friend.
Well, one of the things that you did put to rest, which I was happy, because I started in the beginning talking about this supposed feud between you and Penny, that you tell the real reason why you wound up leaving Laverne and Shirley, and it involved, I believe, a child you were pregnant with Bill Hudson at the time. We just recently had Brett Hudson on the show.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yes, I had gotten married and was pregnant and came back to the 8th season of the show. I was almost 4 months pregnant, and I thought, oh, they're just going to hide me behind furniture and I'll be carrying the groceries or some, and I don't think they knew what to do with me. And when I got my contract for that 8th season, they had me working on my due date to deliver my baby.
Wow.
And I went to the powers that be, and I said, oh, excuse me, but I can't sign this because I can't be doing a show on the night I'm due to deliver. And they said, well, the schedule is the schedule. And I said, but I can't meet the schedule. And it went back and forth and back and forth, and finally, it just, a bunch of other stuff happened, and I just, I was off the show. Mm-hmm. And I was happier for it because, I really needed to put my feet up and start my family.
Right.
And I was very happy for that. But I missed being on the show that last year. And but it all turned. All's well that ends well.
Well, speaking of being pregnant, I have to ask you about another project where you were kind of fake pregnant, because all of our listeners have been sending me emails while they're listening to this interview, and everybody loves the film Gas. And I know that you have a whole section of the book that talks about Gas and working with Roger Corman. And can you talk a little bit about that? And specifically, I guess there was a problem with the baby bump?
There was none when I got there. I was supposed to be 7 months pregnant, and Ben Vereen played my baby daddy, and there was no baby bump when I went to costumes. And so being on a Roger Corman shoot is like going to a splendid little church camp where you just improvise for the talent show. So I looked around. I tried pillows in my motel room. I tried a pillow from the lounge in the motel, which was square. And finally, I just, and they said, and we were starting to shoot the next day. And nobody seemed concerned but me. Anyway, I finally found this pillow that I kept having to push together to make me look like I was actually pregnant. And, I don't even know how old I was, 24, 23, maybe 22, 20. Anyway, and the pillow kept falling out of place, and it would be square on one end and be too high or too low, and so I kept shifting it around and I gave up after a while. It was just a 3-week shoot, and I thought, if anybody's looking at this, then we're all in trouble.
Yeah, but Roger wouldn't stop either. He'd be like, keep going.
No, Roger was, put a 50 on it, dolly in and dolly out. That was everything I learned about movies was with Roger. Put a 50 on it, which was the lens, dolly in and dolly out. What do you want for this shot, Roger? Put a 50 on it, dolly in and dolly out. That was it. But it was a fabulous experience. But I don't write too much about shooting the movie as I do my experience with trying to call my mother and sister to let them know I'm okay, and there was no phones. And I just talked to Tally the other day, Shire, who was she was Tally Coppola at the time, and she was my roommate and dear friend, and just talked to her the other day, and we were talking about that thing I write about, Ramirez's mortuary.
Yes.
And sharing the common wall. That was the motel and the mortuary, and that was the room we were in. And we were talking about that and laughing the other day. Gosh, time flies when one has fun.
Well, even though you were in a room that shared a common wall with a mortuary, you should be lucky that you had a room on a Roger Corman set.
A lot of people brought their own pup tents, believe me. We were all, everyone, in fact, you should do a show one time, just all the people that have worked for Roger Corman, behind the scenes and in front. And they're just every famous name you can think of. Bruce Dern, Jack Nicholson, it's gone out of my head. Karen, it's gone right out of my head. But, I mean, everyone has worked for Roger, and everyone adores him.
Well, I'm really glad you talked about Gas as well as you did, because the other person that was in that film was a favorite of mine, is Eileen Giftos, and she didn't...
Oh, Eileen, I love her.
I love her too, but she didn't want to bring up Gas too much.
She doesn't want to bring that up.
I guess a little too much gas, I guess. But the thing about you, and I don't know if this bothers you or not, you did some great work, legendary work. My God, I mean, American Graffiti and everything, and onto Laverne Shirley. But you did so much more before that really should be mentioned more. Like, we've been having a Cindy Williams Film Festival around here. Last night we saw the first Nudie musical, and then the night before that we saw The Creature Wasn't Very Nice.
The Creature Wasn't Nice, yes. And the first Nudie musical, those are both movies. I didn't mention The Creature Wasn't Nice, but in my book, but I should have. They're both my dear friend Bruce Kimmel, who I went to college with, and we were in theater arts, did many projects together in school, and he for the first Nudie musical, he just called me one day, I don't know, I was 22, 23, and he goes, I have this idea, Cindy, for a musical I want to do, and I want to send up porn. And I said, what? And he said, it's just, I want to send up pornography because it's so ridiculous. I want to shoot it on 8 millimeter and then blow it up so it's really grainy, black and white. And I want to do a musical about a studio, a legitimate film studio that's going under, and the only way they can save themselves is to shoot one, porn film. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And I thought it was he said, I want Jack Nicholson to star in it. That's what he said. I said, yeah, right. Anyway, so he did it. And he did it for, like, no money. And if you look, Ron Howard's in that movie with my friend Lynn, and he has one line, and he asks her if this is Screen Actors Guild Union. He says, is this SAG? And she goes, I don't know. While they're waiting to audition for the film. And I asked Ron one time, I said, why'd you want to do, Bruce's movie? And he said, and this is way, way back when, and he said, I am very interested in new filmmakers and people who want to make movies. This is before Ron had ever made a movie himself. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
No, we were watching last night, and Tiffany's like, that's Ron Howard. I'm like, no, it's not. Oh, my God, it's Ron Howard.
Oh, really? You recognize? Yes, it is. It's him. And isn't that interesting? And I think Bruce, but he totally, Bruce had no money he had no money for anything. So when they did the scene, and it was all our college friends, all people we'd gone to school with. So when they have Alan, who was my boyfriend in college, Alan Abaloo, comes in and he goes, hi, I'm the plumber. And she goes, ooh, well, come in. It was Diana Canova, who we also went to school with. So she says, oh, come in. And so he comes in, and he says, let me take my tools out. Well, he was supposed to have a plunger and a scrub brush and all these things that were funny, that would make you laugh. But we didn't have them in props. So instead he had like a screwdriver and pliers. And I said, Bruce, he looks like a serial killer, not a fun plumber. And he said, we don't have anything else. Anyway, we were just, Bruce was on a shoestring of a budget, and but it was fun. And then ironically, Paramount liked the movie, and they put $100,000 into it, and that's when we shot the dancing dildo scene.
Oh, really?
Which we hadn't shot before. And I say this stuff, but it's so fun. I mean, the movie is like risque. I did get into a fight with Bruce about, I said, why do all the women have to have full frontal nudity? I said, you don't have to do that. He said, that's what I want. And I said, but he said, everybody has full frontal nudity in this. And they did. But, and so, because of the last musical number, which was Let 'Em Eat Cake, that I was in, I got the moniker in People magazine, and I was doing Laverne and Shirley when it came out, the moniker of Little Miss Filth Mouth. And they had a picture of me as Shirley, and then they had under it, Little Miss Filth Mouth. But anyway.
Oh, my God, you got so lucky, because I didn't know about the timing with Laverne and Shirley, because I've got a lot of people that listen that wrote me, and they were upset that you weren't nude in the film. And if you'd have been nude...
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
that would have been really something. Well, I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or a humiliation.
No.
But anyway, I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah.
And we did the film before I was in Laverne and Shirley. And I'm thinking. And then Paramount put the other scene in, and I was doing Laverne and Shirley at the time. And then when it really came out, that's when I got the, Little Miss Filth Mouth.
Well, I know it's got to be a pain in the butt to be nice all the time. And I do know that you did want to play Candy Clark's role in American Graffiti. And
I did.
I took it from watching the first Nudie musical that you took great delight because my daughter here rolled on the floor when you were calling for a stunt cock.
Yes, I insisted on that line. Maybe that's what got me the moniker of Little Miss Filthmouth. But that line was somebody else's, and I said, "No, Bruce, let me tap you on the shoulder and wake you up and say, 'Excuse me, your stunt cock is here.'" And I just wanted that line because I thought it was funny. He says, "What?" I go, "Your stunt cock is here." I just wanted to say it like really mundane, like it was nothing, and so he gave me the line. But I did insist on it. Did I write that in the book? I have to go back and read. Did I say that I insisted? No. Did I write about the first? Yes. Yes. And I did insist upon that line.
Well, what you didn't write is okay because there's so much more in the book. And there's an exciting event coming up this week, okay? And we want to talk about that because you're going to be, I believe you pronounced it the Aero Cinema?
You know, you got me, Terry. I'm not sure. The Aereo on Montana in Los Angeles, yeah.
And they're going to be showing American Graffiti, and you're going to do Q&A, and I imagine you'll have your book there. And wow, what a great thing to be able to see that film on the big screen and meet you and get you to sign the book.
Yes, and I look forward to the Q&A because everybody always comes up with wonderful, fun questions. And but, you know, as far as seeing the film again, I'll probably come in after the film and do the Q&A because I've seen it like 450 times. And I remember being somewhere and Richard Dreyfuss said, "I can't watch this again."
Oh, that sounds like
Richard. I said, "Me neither."
Wow, that totally sounds like Richard.
Before we let you go, Cindy, there was, I think, probably one of my favorite stories in your book is your first night of work at the Whiskey A Go-Go.
Oh,
and can you give us a little bit of an idea? I mean, I guess you had a run-in with Jim Morrison, right?
Yes, it is so tough, you know, Tiffany, to tell this story, and I took great pains to try and write it in real time so that the reader is there with me when. But basically, it was, you know, I got this job at the Whiskey A Go-Go in the '60s at the height of, you know, hippiedom. And the house band was the Flying Burrito Brothers, and they were opening for Chicago, CTA, Chicago Transit Authority. And it was just this marvelous, marvelous environment of music and a light show and just incredible energy in this place, on the Sunset Strip. So it's my first night, and I come in and they give me the VIP section to wait. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe they gave me the VIP section. So I said, okay, you know, maybe it's because I was such a great waitress at the IHOP that they, you know, they deemed it necessary to give me the VIP section. Anyway, so the girls pointed out my first table that was there, and the club was starting to fill up. So I go over to the first table, and I see there's two blondes facing me, and there's a gentleman with his back to me. So I ask the blondes, you know, the girls, I say, what will you have? And they say, Tom Collins, and the other one says, Tom Collins. I go, okay, that was a drink of the day, Tom Collins, a hard drink of the day. And then I said, and you, sir? And this man turns around, and it's Jim Morrison looking up at me. It was like a Greek god. And it took my breath away. And he said, I'll have a bottle of Jack. And I said, bottle of Jack. And I wrote that down, bottle of Jack. To Tom Collins, bottle of Jack. So I go to the bartender, Tony, and who was my bartender in my section, and I put my ticket up on the turn wheel, and I'm about to go away, and he says, hey, you girl, come back here. What is this? And he points to the ticket, and I go, well, that's 2 Tom Collins and a bottle of Jack. And he goes, I can't serve a bottle of Jack to the table. And I go, really? And he says, is Morrison in the club? And I go, yes, he is! Jim Morrison! And he says, well, you tell him that I can give him a single or a double, but I can't serve a bottle of Jack to the table. Go back, tell him. So I run back and I say, Mr. Morrison, I am so sorry, but I'm not allowed to serve you a bottle of Jack at the table. I can bring you a single or a double, but no bottle of Jack. And
Right.
he says, who's tending bar tonight? Tony? And I said, yes. And so he says, you tell Tony I've had a bottle of Jack on this table before, and I demand a bottle of Jack tonight. And I say, yes, sir. I run back, I tell Tony, and it goes back and forth. I can't really tell this story, but it goes back and forth, and the other customers are yelling at me, and then the band, the Flying Burrito Brothers are playing, and then everything, and my shoes are pinching me, and it goes back and forth with, them having this argument with me as the messenger. And finally, I'm in tears, and I go back to Jim Morrison for like the third time, and I say, I am so sorry, Mr. Morrison. I will buy you a double, but I'm not allowed to serve you a bottle of Jack at the table. And I'm crying, and he takes my hand, and he says, asks me, what is your name? And I say, Cindy, and it's the first time I ever heard this used, but it was very big in the 60s. He said, well, Miss Cindy, he said, just bring me a double. We're just playing with you. And I turn around, and all the waitresses, Mario, the manager, the owner of the club, the bartenders, everybody's laughing at me because they had punked me.
Wow.
But to be punked by Jim Morrison, that's pretty good.
What an honor and a humiliation simultaneously.
Well, before we go, Cindy, I did want to say that we send our love to and hope that he's doing okay to David Lander. We absolutely love him.
Yes, well, I will give him that. I thank you for him, and he is doing fine.
Good.
He really is. And I was just thinking about him today because it was his birthday, and I owe him a visit, and I'm going to go see him.
I take it Penny's doing okay, too, because you see all these tabloids, and...
Honey, she'll never die. And that's what I told her. I said, you will never die, will you? I stood in her room, and she goes, no, not yet. Anyway, she's perfectly fine. They're both perfectly fine. Thank you for asking, and I'll tell them both that you did ask after them.
Absolutely. Well, we encourage all of our listeners, check out the book. The book is called Shirley I Jest, A Storied Life, and you can pick it up. And if you're in the LA area and you want to get a chance to head out and meet Cindy and get the book and get it signed, don't forget, coming up on Friday the 24th, she's going to be appearing at the Arrow. It's going to be a double feature of American Graffiti and Conversation with a Q&A and a book signing as well. And Cindy, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been such an honor to talk to you.
Thank you both for having me. What a pleasure.
I think it's very nice of you not to set through American Graffiti, because they're not with you, not in your case. You were wonderful in that film. I totally fell in love with Laurie. But there's been too many times I've watched movies and critiqued them and talked about how they sucked, not realizing the actor was sitting next to me. That's not cool. That's not cool.
Oh, there's a feather in your cap, Terry.
For sure.
All right. Well, thank you again so much, Cindy, and we hope you have a great rest of the weekend.
Thank you, Terry and Tiffany, and I hope you two do also. And this is a great way to start my weekend. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Have a great night.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.